Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Blogging Your Passion show. I'm your host, Jonathan Milligan, and today's topic is 4 proven ways to start an epic blog post every time. If you struggle with writing, or if you struggle with getting started with writing, what is my opening paragraph? How do I make it interesting? How do I pull people into the blog post or into the chapter that I'm writing? Then these writing prompts are really going to help you. So another way to phrase it is 4 writing prompts to use when you feel stuck. Now you can also use this, whether it's text, audio, or video, to use this to create attention and draw people into what you have to say. And it also serves as a great way to get started with your post, get started with your speech, get started with your podcast. Because maybe you struggle with, how do I start it? How do I get started? I know what I want to write, but I just don't know what to say in the beginning. Well, that's what we're going to cover today. Now, I've created a worksheet. It's a 4-page worksheet, actually gives you some examples and goes into more in-depth information on these writing prompts. And you can get that by just texting the word writing. It's WRITING, the word writing, to 44222. So text the word writing to 44222, and I can email you the PDF worksheet, and you can have it. Keep it beside you when you need help starting to write. So let's talk about this. All right. So many writers have a message in their heart, but it gets stuck in their head. Oftentimes, this happens when we're just trying to get started. It's almost like it's like one of those heavy rocks at the top of the hill, right? Starting is the hardest part. Once we get it moving, then the rest of it becomes so much easier. And that's when the momentum kicks in and it begins to flow. But oftentimes we need help just to get started. So I'm going to help you jumpstart your writing today, where you're getting started and you're writing more often. So we're going to cover 4 proven writing prompts that you can use at the beginning of a blog post or chapter in your book. But first, you need to know why the beginning is so important. And I want to give you 2 words. And these 2 words mean everything to me. It was big, huge insight when I realized the importance of these 2 words in being a communicator. So it doesn't matter if you're talking text, audio, or video. These 2 words are going to help you. Say, okay, Jonathan, what are the 2 words? Here they are. Create tension. Create tension. You see, tension creates attention. Let me say that again. Tension creates attention. And if you want to pull more readers into your content, you need to develop the skill of creating tension. Now, I'm not talking about manufacturing tension. I'm talking about real tension. You say, well, what's the difference? I don't understand. Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So how do we do that? Okay, I'm going to give you 4 methods. Here's method number 1, personal story. So by sharing an interesting story from your personal life, you can pull the reader into your writing. The other thing is, stories are real easy for us to share, because have you ever been in a conversation with someone and they say, oh, that reminds you of the time, and then boom, it's 2 or 3 minutes later because they have a story to tell, right? We get passionate about our own personal stories, our experiences. When that funny thing happened, when we met that celebrity, when that thing surprising that was unexpected happened to us, right? So when we do that, when we begin to share from our personal story, it can help. But oftentimes we think, well, no one wants to hear about our stories. But here's the point. You can use your personal stories. I like to call them parables. These little parables in your life to teach a principle. And so maybe you have a particular topic you want to cover. Really think about a personal story that you could share that could go along with that can transition into that. Let me give you an example. So I wrote a blog post called "The One Thing Holding You Back from Being a Successful Writer or Blogger." Now listen to the intro. And I started off with a quote: "Writing is just not your thing. Don't become a writer." I heard those words my freshman year of college from the English professor. Creative Writing 101 was one of the few college classes I enjoyed. Yet, I couldn't seem to score higher than a C on most of my stories. Now, that right there is the beginning that pulls you into it, right? You begin to hear that and like, wait a minute, Jonathan, you write for a living and you were told that writing's not your thing. And by me sharing a personal story of what happened to me my freshman year of college, and then how many years went by where I put writing on the shelf because I just didn't think it was my thing until I picked it back up and I started using it again, right? And then I used that story to transition into the one thing holding you back from being a successful writer. So personal stories. Think about the personal stories that you can use. Here's method number 2. Intriguing question. So a simple, well-asked question can leave a reader wanting more. It does not, let me preface this, it does not have to be super profound. You know, oftentimes the simplest questions will do. You've hit the right question. If your reader is saying in their head, yeah, I've wanted and wondered about the same thing. I've wanted to know about that. I've wondered about that too. Then you've asked the right intriguing question. So let me give you another example. I wrote another blog post called "How to Become a Full-Time Blogger in Half the Time." And here's how I started it out. What would the most successful people do if they had to start from scratch all over again? That was the question. What would the most successful people do if they had to start from scratch all over again? This is probably the most asked question that successful digital entrepreneurs are asked. And then I go through and answer what I would answer. If I had to start over from scratch, what would I do? And that intriguing question pulls people deeper into the content. Okay, so that's number 2. Let's go to method number 3, startling statement. So method 3 is startling statement. That's when you make a bold statement at the beginning to get the conversation going. And what you can do is you can tease the reader for what's about to come later in your chapter, in your post. You can step out and make a bold statement. And then you can start to share your thoughts on that statement. So again, let me use another example from a previous blog post. I wrote a blog post called "The Big Audience Myth" and why a smaller engaged audience beats a large audience every single time. And here's how I started off the post. There's a myth that needs to be crushed. Your belief in this myth is holding you back from building a successful online business. What is this myth? And so it's almost like I'm teasing you to be like, oh, there's a myth that needs to be crushed. What am I believing that's holding me back? I need to know what this is. And so when you start with a startling statement, you can bring people into your reading and you can begin to develop the piece before you actually get into the actual heart of the content, right? It's just a way to get started. Make a bold statement, put it out there. And then another one that I love to use, and I especially like to use this one, I'm just like, I'm stuck. I don't know how to start this thing. Here's method number 4, amazing statistic. So if you hadn't figured out, there's like a statistic, a poll, a survey out there for almost anything. Now, I like to use a service. One of the outsourcing services I use is Fancy Hands. And so what I'll do is I'll give that to them. Hey, go find me 4 statistics about this topic. And 15 minutes later, they deliver me statistics. Now, some of them I want to use, some of them I don't want to use, but it just helps me get things started. So if you're struggling with, how to start your chapter or how to start your blog post, then find a statistic online and share it first to get the conversation going. Now, this may be somebody else's information that they've put together. A big organization out there has done a survey and published the results, or they've done polling and published the results. But it can also be your own survey. You could survey your Facebook, people that follow you on Facebook, or just your general Facebook audience, and ask them a question, poll them on it, and say, I polled some friends and here's what they told me, and start off a conversation based on a statistic. So you say, okay, what is an example of this? All right. I did one on 3 ways Amazon ranks Kindle books and how to get more downloads. And here was the start of the blog post to draw people in and get the conversation started. I said, did you know that 40% of what Amazon collects in ebooks gets paid out to self-published authors? So 40% of everything that's earned in the Kindle store is going directly to self-published authors. Wow, right? And then I go in and I share some more statistics. That was over $220 million in royalties last year that self-published people like you and I earned by publishing our own book. It wasn't one of the big publishers. It was self-published people like you and I. And then I go into the blog post. So again, there's 4 examples, 4 writing prompts, and I would love to hear from you which one of these is the one that you're most excited about. First of all, before you do any of that, capture the idea of creating tension. And that's what every one of these is designed to do. Create some tension in the beginning, and then provide the answer later in your podcast, later in your blog post, later in the chapter, later in your talk. So method 1 again was personal story. Method 2 was intriguing question. Method 3 was a startling statement. And method 4 was an amazing statistic. Well, again, if you want to see this 4-page worksheet with examples that I've put together, then make sure that you text the word writing to 44222. Well, that's it for the Blogging Your Passion show. Thank you so much for tuning in, being here, and thank you for constantly providing feedback for me. I welcome your feedback. You can always shoot me an email at jonathan@bloggingyourpassion.com. Would love to hear from you. Until then, go out there, blog your passion, and make your difference in the world.